wanted to do for a while. I just haven't really had the time to do it, nor have I had the motivation, nor have I found the recording software. But I just found out that Mac's shitty little in computer, I guess, recording software, QuickTime Player, can actually record your mic. And I haven't been doing that for the past 3 years or something in all the videos that I've recorded. So I decided I would now record my mic and I would start on a little bit of a cannoning series. So this is going to be probably a once or twice a week sort of thing, or whenever I can be bothered to upload the episodes. It's going to be poorly edited, but I'm going to start from the basics and work my way up. It's going to be very in-depth, covering everything from the redstone to the order of entities to what mods you should use, what texture pack I personally prefer to use, and anything sort of related to that. So it's mostly going to be focused around cannoning on complex, where some of the features aren't particularly refined. I'll also cover cannon servers, the best ways to learn how to run your wires cleanly, how to keep everything organized, how to count ticks. So it's just going to be very in depth. And yeah, so that'll basically sum it up. Yes, we'll get started. So basically the fundamentals and the core of the game is going to be your redstone. You use everything. You basically use redstone for everything. You use it for pistons, levers, clocks, item sorters, potion brewers, anything that you want to automate in a way, you're going to use redstone. So, as you can probably tell in the creative inventory, there is a fair few different components to redstone. I won't be covering everything. I'll just be covering most of the stuff related to cannons that you can use. So I guess I'll just get started with redstone. I guess another thing before I do get started, this is my own personal resource pack that I have made. It isn't perfect. It's what I prefer to use personally for cannoning. I'm not sure if it has any impacts on frames, but it keeps everything simple. Keeps the game flowing nicely. It's very good for troubleshooting. You can see the repeater here. And yeah, so I'll just have this. I'll have this just linked in the description below. So getting started. This is redstone. Redstone. It'll power anything, or it's a bit hard to explain. It won't power things to the side of it. It'll power things that it's pointing into. And it has a signal length of 15. So you can see it's 15 here, and it decreases as the signal length gets further, all the way to the end. Redstone can power blocks as well. So say if you power stone block like that, that block is now powered. So you can run pistons into it, just like that. You can't actually run redstone back out the block though. If my voice sounds shaky, it's because it's fucking freezing and I haven't taken the proper precautions to warm myself up on this fine winter morning. But yeah, redstone's basically got two states. It's got on and it's got off. It's kind of like binary, 1 and 0. So that's sort of the basic. This is what you're going to be powering basically everything off. You can't really do anything without redstone dust. I've seen people who try and power things completely off, like powered rails using observers and stuff like that. Frankly, I think that's absolutely disgusting, and you shouldn't really be doing that. But yeah, for the most part, in everything you're going to use redstone just to carry your signals through. That's basically it for redstone. We'll just move on to, I guess, the second main thing you'll be using, which is repeaters. Pretty simple. Each position of the redstone torch on the back of the repeater just refers to the delay that it will impose when you power it. You do that, you'll see that they all go on. I guess before I get too in depth with repeaters, I'll quickly run over game ticks, redstone ticks, and seconds. So you'll find on every server the main thing that you're going to be running off is going to be ticks per second with relation to redstone speed, crops growing. Basically, the entirety of the game will run slower when the ticks per second is slower. 20 is normal. 20 is also pretty much the max unless you mod it differently. And yeah, so for every second, so if we say this is, let's get some blue wool. Happen is, let's just say this blue piece of wool here, that blue piece of wool there, that is 1 second. So if we make this one, that's 25 blocks long, I think, if I'm counting correctly. Now, in every second, there's 20 game ticks, and there is another unit which is called redstone ticks. So you can see on the repeater, I've got like little numbers here. These refer to redstone ticks. So repeaters, torches, they all act in redstone ticks. We'll ignore that for now. We'll just focus on what ticks actually are. So for every, I'm just going to break 5 blocks, so this is just 1 second. For every second, there is 10 redstone ticks. So that's 1 second. In the time that it takes for you to go from 0 to 1 seconds, 10 redstone ticks will occur. And in the same vein as that, this will be, I'm absolutely shaking right now because it's fucking cold. In the same vein of that, this is going to be your game ticks. So in every second, there is 20 game ticks. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So yeah, on the left you've got seconds. In the middle you've got redstone ticks. And on the right here you have your game ticks. So you can see here that, yeah, in the space of a second, that's what's going to happen. So with that, yeah, that's basically your main measurement of time. For the most part, with all your basic cannons, you are just going to be worrying about your redstone ticks. When you get a bit more advanced, you'll start worrying about the game ticks as well. And yeah, now that you know that, I guess I'll just get into counting them. So let's get some signs. So for every I guess second, there is 1 second. For every second, there is 10 redstone ticks. And in 1 second, there is also 20 game ticks. So when you do run /TPS in a world, or it'll commonly display TPS on the right hand side, in tab you can see on the bottom right there, it also displays TPS. That simply refers to how many game ticks are occurring each second. So if your TPS is 10, your game's effectively running at half speed, because in the space of 1 second, there are 10 game ticks being processed, with which this will actually be more spread out. So if we say the game is now running at 10 TPS, you'll get something more similar to this. So we go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's your game ticks. And then your redstone ticks, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it'll be a bit hard to show the second. Actually, no, because the second is a constant. It's a constant unit of time. So in this same vein, we're just going to be going 1 second. This is going to be, how many redstone ticks is that? That's 5 redstone ticks. 5 redstone ticks. And then this is going to be, I think it's 10 game ticks. So when the server is running on 20 TPS, in the space of 1 second, you're getting 10 redstone ticks and 20 game ticks occurring. When the server is running at 10 TPS, in the span of 1 second, you're getting 5 redstone ticks and 10 game ticks. So you can see it's pretty much just half of that. Of course, anything else in that range is going to affect it differently, and the rate at which game ticks and redstone ticks change will be dependent on your TPS. But yeah, for the most part, 20 is the standard. 20 is what you want to be at. Some cannons will explode at lower TPSs. Most will just function slower. So say if you're running at 10 TPS, then your cannon's going to be running at half speed because the game's processing everything twice as slow, or the server is. I guess at which point now we can hop into redstone ticks. So I had this little repeater set up here that I didn't exactly finish. It's my texture pack here, which is showing the number on the side, which refers to the amount of redstone ticks. In the game, the only thing that will change will be the position of this redstone torch at the back here. So you can see, depending on how far that is back, that is the timing that you currently have on that repeater. So if we turn that off, you'll see it goes from left to right, turns off, and then from left to right, it'll turn back on. So basically, this is going to be, for the most part, what you are using to extend or change your timings. All the other blocks also have a certain time at which they take to process their redstone delay, pretty much. But for the most part, you want to be using repeaters, because the good thing about repeaters is you can increase this delay, and instead of having 1 tick here, so if we get a comparator, we'll just say that a comparator is one redstone tick for now. That's 1 redstone tick. You can change the mode of a comparator, but you can't actually change the pulse length of it. So what you can do in 4 spots with a comparator, you can do in 1 with a redstone repeater. So you'll see that if we get some lamps, this is just purely for demonstrative purposes, we get some lamps, so we put a lamp here at the end of that, and we put a lamp there at the end of that. When we flick that lever, you should see that... What's going on here? That's what's happening. You will see that now, both of these are going off simultaneously. But again, you can see the benefit of using redstone repeaters is you can do it in 4 times as small a space as the comparator. So for the most part, when you want to increase timings, use comparators. Don't really use anything else. The other main benefit of the repeater, I guess, is the fact that it functions, well, it functions, 1, as a diode. So anyone who's done electrical before would be able to tell you that the diode will let a signal through one way, but it won't let it, well, it will let it back through the other way, but with much greater resistance. So you can see here that when I've got this redstone line powered here, the repeater is facing forwards. I've actually got a little arrow which just tells me which way the repeater is facing as well. When you flick that lever, you will see that... Does this work? I can't run commands. But you will see that there, that repeater is extending that signal length as well as pushing it through that side. But just like a diode, when you flick the lever on this side, the signal is not traveling back through that repeater. So the repeater will only let the redstone signal through in the way in which it's pointing. Similar goes for the comparator as well, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So for the most part, yeah, you just want to be, if you need to extend a signal length, I tend to use repeaters. It's personal preference, you can do it otherwise as well. You can use repeaters to do it if you want to have something one way, if you want to power something on this side and then something on this side, but not then power it backwards, I guess, to an extent. If you don't want your cannon fucking feeding yourself in a big loop, pretty much just do this. And that will just mean that it can't power itself backwards, effectively. If you power it from somewhere else in the cannon, it won't go backwards, it'll only power everything forwards of it. So if you have like a little tree, I guess, it'll branch out like a little bit of a little bit of a tree, and so when you power it from, I guess, the stump of the tree, or the roots, whatever you would like to call it, it's going to power everything in front of it. So when I flick this lever here, you'll see I don't actually have the pulse length. So yeah, if your pulse length doesn't reach that far, you can just add another comparator. Not a comparator, sorry, a repeater. Again, you turn that off, and it will turn off the tree. You turn it back on. This is a really stupid example. But regardless, you will then see that if you power the back bits of, or I guess the branches of the tree, you can't actually power it backwards, because the repeaters are there acting as one-way gates. So that's pretty much repeaters. Repeaters have an additional functionality where they can actually lock the signal as well. You will see that, like, that redstone, or that, it's actually bedrock. In the default texture pack, it's bedrock, because the texture pack that I'm using, it's just that color there. That will actually lock. I've never found really use for this in a cannon. Some people have found uses for it with, like, compressors and stuff, but for the most part, what that's going to do is that's actually going to lock the signal, so you can't actually push redstone through that, no matter the delay. If you put a repeater right up against it, it won't do it. If you say unlock the repeater, sorry. If you unlock the repeater, then that will let the redstone through to the rest of the circuit. If you relock it while it's powered, and then you turn it back off here, it remains locked. And then when you turn it back off, it'll unpower everything else. That's a very minor functionality, and that doesn't really. I've never really had a use for it, but I'm sure if you're crafty enough, you can find a use for it. I guess now we'll just move on to the second main, I guess, redstone component that I want to talk about, which is the comparator. Comparators are a bit of a funky one. They're really useful for logic circuits and a lot of, like, you can use them for item counters, item sorters, anything sort of like that. You can use them to tell when chests are full, because they actually read the contents of a container. So if you put, like, a chest here or something, it will output a signal strength, which is proportional to however many items are in said chest. For the most part, you're not using them for chests and hoppers and stuff with regards to a cannon. What you're mainly going to be using the comparators for. Actually, I lied when I said that, because you can use them for something called shot control, which I'll talk about later. But for the most part, with a cannon, what you're going to be using the comparators for is something called rendering, as well as using them as pretty much capacitors. So what capacitors will do is they will store a charge, and then they will release said charge over a period of time. So basically, this is like a little capacitor here. If you say power it turned on, it charges up. And then when you turn it back off again, it starts, I guess, it doesn't really release charge, because there's no real charge in Minecraft, but you sort of get the idea. You can do, like, all sorts of, like, neat little circuits with these, but for the most part, they are heavily used if you want to extend a signal beyond when you turn the actual cannon off. So that's one use for them. Another use is something called rendering, which again I'll get into later. And I guess the other main use for them, it's a bit hard to explain. I kind of need to get into the actual functionality of these things first, which I should probably do. So comparators, like, I don't know, I'm not particularly well versed in the usage of a comparator, but as far as I know, it's got two modes, where you can turn that torch on and off, and that will actually depend on the input in the sides. So if you say run redstone into the sides, one of them is like a, okay, so this is a subtract mode. So you can see, so is that with the torch? Okay, I'm not. So by the looks of it, when the torch is on, this is like subtracting it. So the signal, the pulse going in is, I'll just get some signs so I can just diagram this. The pulse going in is a value of 15, so you got 15 signal strength going in here. This starts at 15. The signal strength going in the side is 10, and then the output strength is 5. So I believe what it's doing is it's just subtracting the side. So when the signal strength here is 10, 15 take 10 is 5. So you're getting a different signal length there. So in the vein of that, comparators are commonly used for clocks on cannons. Of course, there's other features for all this stuff. This is just what I personally use them for, but you can actually see that this is actually turning itself off and on. How this is working is basically it's in the same. Yeah, so it needs to be in the subtract mode. So you can see that front redstone torch is on. So that's in the subtract mode. Basically what it's doing is it's sending a pulse through this comparator. Because I have a lever here. This is how you lever cannons. This is how you pretty much auto cannons. There's other clocks you can use. This is my favorite way of doing it. What's happening is, I'll just turn this off for the time being. So after one tick, this redstone comparator here will power this repeater. This redstone comparator is permanently on because of the fact that there is a lever here. So when I turn this on, it remains powered. So what it's doing is after one tick, it is sending, one redstone tick, sorry, it is sending its pulse length forwards into this repeater here. After 4 ticks, this repeater will send it forwards, and it will power this line of redstone here, and it will also power this piece of dust here, because all the redstone's connected. After another 4 ticks, so now we're at 9 ticks total, this repeater here will get, or this redstone here, sorry, will get powered. So basically, in this initial little loop, when this comparator is on, it will turn that on, turn that on. So it'll turn this on at 1 tick, this on at 5 ticks, because 1 plus 4 is 5. It'll turn this one on at 9 ticks, and then it will pulse the side of the comparator. You can see that the redstone dust here is physically joining inside the comparator. And then what that's doing is that is putting in a signal strength of 15 into the comparator. So you're powering it with 15 here, you're taking away 15, you are then getting a signal strength of 0. So what happens then is, because the output is 0, this comparator will turn off. It'll take 1 tick for the game to, or for the comparator to realize that it is now outputting a signal strength of 0. This will then turn off after 4 ticks, and then this will turn off after another 4 ticks. So for 0.9 of a second, the signal is going around in this little circle. And then for another 0.9 of a second, the signal is deactivating. So you'll see in this little circuit here that this turns on first, then this turns on, then this turns on. It takes 0.9 of a second for it to go around. And then because of the subtracting properties of the comparator, this will turn off, then this will turn off, and then this will turn off. And then it's a cycle. So this pulse length there, that's 0.9 of a second. That's kind of neither here nor there. But the power of this is basically, in a very, very small area, you can get a consistent clock. You can change the values of that clock. So you can see now that this is turning on for a certain amount of time, turning off for a certain amount of time. It's actually faster because the comparator doesn't need to go through. We've just lost 3 ticks effectively. So turn that from 4 to 1. Again, you can do it again. It's now pulsing, I think that's for like 0.2 of a second. So it's actually, no, it'd be 0.3 of a second. Because after 1 tick, the comparator turns on. After 1 tick, this redstone repeater turns on. After another tick, this redstone repeater turns on. So you get 3 ticks total, at which point this turns off. Takes a tick for it to realize that this is turned off. Takes another tick to realize that this is turned off. Another tick, and then, yeah, it goes back to the beginning. For the most part, when you're classifying cannon speeds, it will be down to how fast this clock operates the cannon. In this case, since it takes 0.3 of a second, or 3 redstone ticks to turn off, or turn on, it takes another 3 redstone ticks to turn off. This is going to be functioning at 0.6 of a second. So the second rating is just how long it takes to complete a circuit and fire the cannon again. So again, if you add some ticks, you slow that nice and down. Now you've got 1 plus 4 plus 4, and then again 1 plus 4 plus 4, which is 9 to turn on, 9 to turn off, which is 8 in total. And now that isn't 0.6 of a second anymore, that is 1.8 seconds. So it'll take 0.9 of a second to turn on, 0.9 of a second to turn off. And that will now be functioning every 1.8 seconds. It will be sending a pulse out initially, and the pulse will remain on for 0.9 of a second, remain off for 0.9 of a second. It's fairly simple. This is how I personally clock my cannon. Some people use other ways, like they use little redstone repeater lines. I personally like this comparator method more because it gives you a lot more control to control the pulse length, and it does it in a smaller area. So again, this is a 1.6 second circuit with a pulse length of 1. I'll get into the pulse lengths later. Probably in the next video. I just want to cover most of the redstone components in this one. But again, this is sort of the same area. You can again change the delay, but you can't put a lever on this circuit here. So if I say put a lever here, if I try turning that circuit on, it's just going to lock itself up. I don't give any of the repeaters any time to reset. Whereas for this little clock here, you can turn it off and on, and with the additional functionality of you can press a button, your button will fire the cannon once, and it won't fire again because the pulse doesn't get around in time, and it can't cycle again. But when you put the lever on, you can see that it will constantly pulse. So this is my favorite little clock. This is the main thing I use comparators for, that and these little pulse extenders here. Apart from that, you don't really need them for any of the logic. You don't really need them to subtract, to add. This probably isn't the tutorial. I'm not going to go fully in depth on comparators in here anyway. And yeah, that's sort of the comparator. That's going to be the main uses of it, the functionality. One other thing that I would like to point out is the fact that comparators do not increase signal strength like a repeater. It doesn't set it back to 15. I'm pretty sure it just stays constant through the comparator. Yeah, so it starts at 15, 14, 13, 12, and then it goes through the comparator, starts back at 12, 11, 10. So you can see there that it doesn't boost up the signal strength like a repeater does. See, it goes back to 15 here, and if I switch it back out to a comparator, it goes back to 12. So yeah, you don't really want to use. Well, yeah, you can't use comparators to increase the pulse distance of your cannon. This video is probably going to be a bit long, so what I'm going to do now is I'll just run over all the little current carrying redstone components. So I'll just get into redstone blocks very quickly. Redstone blocks, it's pretty simple. It's a movable block with an output of 15, just like a repeater, just like a lever, just like a button. You can move this redstone block back and forwards. Nothing really special there. Same goes for pistons. Normal piston, you can't retract it though, so then you get into that little problem there. I'll cover redstone torches. I kind of want to cover observers in a whole different video because there's so much functionality to them, and I use them very heavily. Redstone torches remain permanently on unless they're powered, in which case they will turn off. So they will actually invert your signal. Like all the other redstone components here, I don't actually have a number on the redstone torch, but it actually takes 0.1 of a second, or one redstone tick, to process that signal. So it isn't instant. There is a very short stretch of time where this and this is both on. So it might be a bit hard to see, but if you power that, there's a very, very small fraction of time. Oh, Okay, so I didn't power that block there. There's a very, very small fraction of time when you'll actually be able to see it's both on simultaneously. So there'll be a 0.1 of a second where this turns on here, and while this redstone torch is turning off, this is still remaining on. Kind of not important. But yeah, that's like the main sort of quirk about a redstone torch. They just remain permanently on. Again, it's a pulse length of 15. You can use this to increase signal length, but the main problem is you are going to be inverting the signal each time you want to do it. So say if I put another redstone torch here, you can see that the lever is off, and this little stretch of redstone here is also off. And when I turn it on, that lever is on, and that stretch of redstone is also on. Runs into the same problem of comparators, where you can't delay it for a long time in a short area. So I personally wouldn't use redstone torches to increase the signal unless you have to invert it. I'll cover those sorts of cases eventually as well. But for the most part, yeah, that's sort of like 3 or 4 main things that I wanted to cover here. I wanted to cover redstone dust, I wanted to cover repeaters, comparators, and torches. I would highly recommend in your own time going to, I'm using Complex's cannoning world here. I would highly recommend in your own time to go and play around with these things yourself. Play around with the repeaters. Play around with the comparators. Play around with these sorts of clocks here. Again, you can actually make this clock longer by doing this. And again, it's in a much smaller area, and I find it much more versatile than that. Only downside is you can't get a set pulse length out of it, but we'll cover that later. But yeah, for the most part, that's like the four fundamental redstone components that you're going to be using to carry signals, to invert signals, to extend signals, to retract signals. Anything you want to do with carrying and moving a signal around, for the most part, I've covered here. As I said, I'm going to cover observers separately, because they are, in my opinion, the best block currently in the game. And yeah, so that will basically cover up this first little video here that I wanted to do. I've got no clue how long this recording is, so I'm sorry if it's a long period of time. Again, texture pack will be in the comments, and I will see you inside your base when I inevitably split you.